Star Wars The Clone Wars was a surprisingly deep show, one that dived constantly into dark themes and concepts of politics and philosophy. The Clone Wars arc we'll be discussing today is probably the deepest in the whole show and dived deep into the nature of the Force and Anakin's role in bringing balance to it. Most of you watching likely know the Mortis arc very well, but whether you understand it is another matter. The Mortis arc is quite possibly the most misunderstood arc in the entire show, mostly because the philosophy behind it is a lot more complicated than first appears.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
On the surface, the Mortis arc does seem somewhat simple. The daughter and the son represent the light side and the dark side respectively, while the father represents the balance between them, or perhaps the Force itself. They draw Anakin Skywalker to their plane of existence because they believe that he is the chosen one. The son then seeks to turn him to the dark side to upset the balance, and ultimately, all three of the ones need to die to restore the balance between them. But this interpretation seems to reinforce an erroneous concept of balancing the Force. Contrary to what some would tell you, the balance of the Force is not the same as balancing the light and the dark. The light itself is balance, the natural order of things, with the dark being the destabilization of that balance, a perversion of nature. The Force is balanced with supremacy of the light and eradication of the dark, not with the two sides being balanced in power. George Lucas himself has said as much. But then why does the Mortis arc seem to contradict this? After all, Lucas himself was heavily involved in the story. The simple answer is that the meaning of the arc isn't so simple. The daughter and the son are more than just personifications of the light and the dark. Indeed, to call them as such is misleading. They are the personification of the elements of humanity that feed the light and the dark. The daughter represents a care for life, a sense of selflessness and openness to the will of the Force. This is why she is almost always acting in accordance with what she believes the father wants. The son, on the other hand, represents the selfish instincts of humanity, a sense of ambition and desire for power that often leads him to clash with the daughter and with the father in turn. In this sense, the daughter is naturally drawn to the light and the son is naturally drawn to the dark, but they aren't one and the same with their respective sides. Indeed, a major part of the Mortis arc is actually about the son falling to the dark side, which is what offsets the balance of Mortis. In that light, the father represents the will of the Force, in a sense. He strives to maintain the natural balance of things, the balance between selflessness and selfishness, something that the daughter, as a lightsider, seeks to maintain as well. The son falls to the dark side when he seeks to upset this balance. He and the daughter battled before, as was their nature, but it was only during the events of the Mortis arc that the balance was upset completely. It was during the arc that the son's ambition got the better of him. He sought power beyond his due. He sought control of the chosen one, and so he fell to the dark side, and for the first time sought supremacy in doing so. As a result, the only way to restore balance in Mortis was to destroy him. An additional layer of clarity on the topic comes from the Book of Sith, a semi-obscure legend sourcebook from, of all people, Mother Talzin. As established by the Book of Sith, the Nightsisters are aware of the daughter and the son, who they worship as the winged goddess and the fanged god. Their interpretation of these figures is pretty spot on in regards to the episode arc, and so we're going to briefly discuss them. The Nightsisters consider the daughter a goddess of fertility and growth, a mediator with infinite wisdom, while they see the son as a god of hunting and strength, who they believe to be with them every time they fight or feast. Both are an essential part of the natural cycle, the balance of the Force that the light side seeks to protect. These are perhaps the clearest and most accurate direct descriptions that any source, legends or canon gives for the daughter and for the son. Keep them in mind as we discuss the character arcs of each of the ones. The daughter is the first of the ones that we are introduced to, and her character arc is the shortest and the simplest. She originally appears as a guide for Anakin, who she tries to bring to the father. Indeed, throughout the whole arc, she is depicted as always acting in line with the father's will, or what she believes his will to be. Even when she fights or tests Anakin, she does so either at the father's bidding or out of a desire to protect him and maintain the balance. That said, she isn't perfect. In the separate episode of the arc, she acts out of turn and with a greater degree of urgency than the father considers necessary. But this is less her acting in conflict with the will of the Force and rather an overzealous misinterpretation of it, a mistake many Lightsiders make, most notably many Jedi councils. But she's ultimately still on the father's side. She gives her life to save him and to save Ahsoka from death. She is, at her core, the embodiment of selflessness, the driving force behind the light side. But selflessness is not the only natural component of human psychology. That's where the Son, the embodiment of selfishness and ambition, comes in. His character arc is the most complicated of all the ones, and it's also the most interesting. His character path through the story of Mortis is a metaphor for the path leading to the dark side. The Son doesn't actually start out on the dark side in the arc. In the first episode, he isn't that malicious at all. His path to the dark side begins with the second episode, though the foundations of that path were likely laid during the events of the first. In that episode, he captures Ahsoka as part of a bid to turn Anakin to his side and escape Mortis, and corrupts her into an agent of his will. It should be said here that what he did was different from turning Ahsoka to the dark side. He simply amplified the negative elements of her character, her bitterness and resentment, to the point where they consumed her. That's not the same as having been turned to the dark side, and the difference is made clear in the difference between how she acts and how Anakin acts when he falls to the dark side in the next episode. The Son actually still hasn't fallen to the dark side in the second episode, which is why he resides in his own castle instead of the Well of the Dark Side, a separate location on Mortis. But the second episode is about his descent down that path. As his ambitions and lust for power grow, they begin to consume him, turning him against the daughter and eventually against the father as well. As part of the battle at the end of the episode, he tries to kill the father, only for the daughter to take the dagger of Mortis instead. The Son is horrified by this and flies off to the Well of the Dark Side in grief. This is where the Son falls to the dark side. The daughter is his Sith sacrifice. The Son killed the person who emotionally grounded him in the universe. Much like Palpatine killed his father and his family, Dooku killed Sifo Dyas, and Anakin would eventually kill Padme. With this emotional grounding severed, all that was left to the Son was his ambition and desire for power, and it was then that he was lost to the dark side. This is actually a bit of a missing link in the arc, because the scene that was supposed to make this clear was cut.
I have done as you've asked.
Why do you weep like a child?
You told me that I would be free. You told me that all would be right.
And it is.
Then why do I feel such pain?
Because you have not embraced your resentment.
Who are you? You must answer me this time.
We are those who have come before. Those who were betrayed. Those who hate. We are the wielders of the dark side.
What do you want from me?
We stand before you, disciples of the dark side, intent on its supremacy. It has been foreseen that one lives who will control the universe.
Where?
It is unknown, but know this. The Chosen One is the key. He who controls Skywalker will control everything. We tell you this to guarantee your success.
And if I fail?
The scene was cut for two reasons. Firstly, because it clashed with George Lucas's affirmation that Darksiders did not become Force ghosts, and secondly, because the appearance of Darth Revan didn't line up with his story at all, as he died having been redeemed. The Son's final fall to the dark side led him to corrupt Anakin as well, in hopes of destroying the balance and reigning supreme over the galaxy. When he fell, the father recognized him as a threat to the balance and so ultimately facilitated his destruction. The son didn't have to die because the daughter was dead. He had to die because, in a sense, he was already dead. He was lost to the dark side, the perversion of nature, and the upsetting of the natural order, and so, for balance to be restored, he had to be destroyed. The father is fairly simple, though he's also rather mysterious. He represents the will of the Force. He strives to keep the selfless and the selfish in balance so that the cycle of life can continue as it was meant to be. His children squabbled constantly, and he ensured that their fights didn't get out of hand and upset the natural order. This is why the daughter, as a representative of the light, always sought to align herself with him. To serve the light side of the Force is to strive to follow the will of the Force and maintain balance. When the father's fears were confirmed and the son fell to the dark side, he sought to destroy him. Not because the daughter was gone, but because as an agent of the dark side, he was a threat to the balance and to nature itself, irrespective of surrounding circumstances. And so, where does Anakin come in? Throughout the arc, the father expresses the belief that as the chosen one, Anakin's duty is to replace him. This, in a sense, represents how the Jedi viewed the prophecy of the Chosen One. They saw it as a simple, somewhat passive role and missed the true significance of it, just as the father did. The daughter, as far as we're shown, mostly shared the father's perspective on the matter, though more in regards to stopping the son. But it's Anakin's relation with the son that's important. The son sees Anakin as the key to his supremacy, just like Darth Sidious does. And so he tries to capture him, turning him to the dark side through visions of the future and promises of setting things right. All of the ones see Anakin's role as the chosen one as simple, but in the end, after Anakin is brought back from the dark side, the true meaning of this mantle becomes apparent. Contrary to the son's beliefs, Anakin is not a tool, and contrary to the father's beliefs, Anakin isn't simply a replacement either. His role is to shake up the pattern that the galaxy has been trapped in, actively destroying the dark side while reforming the light into what it's supposed to be. His role is an active one rather than a passive one. His slaying of the son represents the defeat of Darth Sidious, and the subsequent death of the father represents the death of the old ways of the Jedi, but not the death of the balance or of the light. The father's death is simply a change in the times. The Mortis arc is actually an allegory for the entire Star Wars saga. The tens of thousands of years before the events of the prequels are filled with clashes between the light and the dark, inconclusive conflicts that fail to resolve the true problem, and fail to truly establish balance in the Force. It takes the emergence of the Chosen One and the events of the saga to do that, and in restoring the balance of the Force, Anakin truly does reshape the galaxy. He destroys the dark side and reshapes the light, bringing an end to the conflicts by resolving the problem at the heart of them all. The Mortis arc represents this. Mortis itself is a metaphor for the conflict between the light and the dark, the stage on which the tale of the Jedi and Sith is set. It disappears in the end because when Anakin fulfilled the prophecy of the Chosen One, those conflicts ceased to exist. So, that's the true meaning of the Mortis arc. One of the most misunderstood Clone Wars stories of the entire show. But as per usual guys, I want to know your thoughts. Had you picked up on this before, or was some of it a revelation to you? Let us know in the comment section below. And as always, just before you go, make sure you check out all those links in the description below to join our wider Geetsly's community on Discord, our Geetsly's gaming network, and if you want to help support the channel more than you already are by watching this video, then please do check out the Patreon. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.